A good protagonist is written in such a way so a majority of players can quickly and easily identify with them. To achieve that, it's natural that a protagonist has to have traits that would impress a player, and some traits that a player would have themselves. Additionally, it's important that a protagonist makes decisions with which a player would agree. The problem is that there's only one protagonist, and in the case of GTA, millions of players. Each and every one of them is different and has a different picture of an ideal protagonist in their head, so there's simply no way to do everyone right. Of course, the advantages of each character are not the only thing that Rockstar has to worry about while creating a protagonist. The flaws are just as important, and if we look at Claude, Tommy, CJ, and others, we can indeed easily find something that we don't like. And that's pretty much the thought that inspired me to make this video. We start with Claude. The thing that in my opinion irritates the most in this character, and what at some point becomes an issue from the perspective of the whole story, is his complete lack of any objective. I mean, okay, it's possible to find some potential objectives of Claude, but those are just theories. They're just as easy to come up with as to debunk them. Looking at the beginning and the ending of the game, one could think that Claude's target is to get revenge on his ex-girlfriend, who set him up and tried to kill him. But it's hard to support that theory with anything, cause like, in your opinion, did Claude take any actions towards achieving this target? GTA 3 goes as follows. At the beginning, Claude luckily escapes the convoy, then 8-Ball finds him a job, and so far, it all makes sense. An average player would probably think, alright, Claude has to earn some money, gain some contacts, get some ground, and then think about some bigger target. In reality though, after some time, Claude is making serious amounts of money, and the target, it's still not there. Assuming that the target was to kill Catalina, there's literally no direct action taken by Claude that would get him any closer to reaching his target. Of course, Catalina eventually does get killed by Claude. However, it's not a result of Claude's initiative. That's a result of a fortunate series of events that, let me repeat myself, were not initiated by Claude. Claude is playing a role of a spectator of everything that is going on around him, doing whatever he's asked by anyone who pretends to be his ally at the time. And that's how it goes all the way until the exchange mission. In terms of Tommy Vercetti, his biggest flaw was definitely arrogance. Too high confidence and the lack of good decision making based on the analysis of the circumstances. Let me explain. Tommy was being very arrogant at times. Often, it seemed as if he considered himself invincible and untouchable, thinking that the world owes him a living. Take his behavior in the party mission.
I'll tell you what we're gonna do. You're gonna find out who took our cocaine, and then we're gonna kill them.
And the confidence on its own is obviously great, but in Tommy's case, he just ended up wanting to ruin people, nothing more. This all would sometimes lead Tommy to make stupid and rushed decisions. For example, the Gonzalez stunt, whom Tommy killed without a deeper thought, instead of interrogating him and finding out something more. After all, Cortez, before sending Tommy to kill Gonzalez, has told him that the guy's got a loose tongue and squeals left and right. Well, it was not exactly a challenge to come up with an idea to get the fool, push him against the wall, and see what he knows. And as it turns out, he'd say quite a lot, if we look at the events of GTA Vice City stories and Gonzalez's work for Diaz. A similar case was with Leo Teal in the back alley brawl mission, but there at least, looking at what Leo was like, I don't think Tommy would be getting too much out of him. Another example is the end of the story, where Tommy did not impress as well. He was so sure of his strength that he didn't fear Sonny Forelli's organization at all. But hey, what are you talking about? It's good he wasn't scared. Thanks to it, Sonny brought his ass over to Vice and got booked. Well, technically, yes, but you know, this whole thing was pretty unrealistic. That's the thing. That is a computer game, and in those, such situations take place quite often. Realistically speaking, that was a huge risk for Tommy's operation. Just for the record, the Forelli Mafia was the strongest family in Liberty City that for years has been building their power and increasing their member count. Tommy's gang, on the other hand, was maybe like a few weeks old. And even if we assume that Tommy was aware of that, knew that it had been a hard fight and didn't want it to occur, and so he wanted to give Sonny fake money and send him back home with it. It was logical that this fake money deception would eventually be exposed, and Sonny would soon turn up for the real money. But that thought clearly didn't occur to Tommy. So Tommy made good decisions multiple times. He was good at observing the current situation and learned from his more experienced colleagues. But sometimes arrogance, overconfidence, and pride got him a step ahead from complete disasters. The biggest flaw of Carl Johnson from GTA San Andreas is, in my opinion, naivete, which was blatantly exposed in the thread of the betrayals of Smoke and Ryder. And if we just pay some attention to the dialogue and to what's going on in the Los Santos section, it won't be a challenge to notice that Smoke and Ryder have something shady going on. Smoke kept saying some poetry. He'd never tell what was the deal with all those things CJ'd helped him out with, especially with the Russians. And we got all those suspicious visits of Tenpenny as well. I get that they were friends and you should trust your friend completely, but here it was quite obvious that something is simply not right. CJ though, he was blaming the water sticks of Ryder that his ass was high on all the time, and Smoke's oversized belly that probably messed with his mind. CJ kept with this story till the end, and eventually he got screwed over by Smoke and Ryder, which, as we know, hurt a lot. And the worst thing about it is that CJ didn't even learn from that and was still naive later in the story. He even trusted a dude that, okay, he was indeed friendly and nice, but at the same time had his brain washed by all kinds of acid and other psychedelics.
Damn, man, there must be 2 tons of that stuff back there.
3. Cause CJ, on the orders of drugged up Truth, invaded the military base and stole that shining green weird serum, becoming a target of like every single law enforcement authority on Earth. Why all that? Hell, I don't know. I mean, he did make quite a few bucks out of that. But what reward that would be matching the risk taken did CJ see in all this? I honestly can't tell. It didn't get much better in the case with Mike Torino. Here, fortunately for CJ, Mike actually turned out to be a man of his word and indeed had powerful contacts and could make things happen. So eventually, even though CJ was throwing himself in the arms of death in each task for Mike, at least Mike, in return for that, used his connections and got Sweet out of jail. We actually already have spoken about it in the past that CJ's approach to working for Torino was very irrational. He didn't even try to verify anything. He met Mike as a boss of a big criminal organization. Then CJ destroyed that organization, and after that, Mike managed to make CJ come to his ranch in the country and told him that he's some super important government agent. He added some big talk about Sweet, and CJ just believed in everything without the slightest willingness to verify any of it. And then, well, CJ paid a lot of money for Torino by purchasing a piece of land imitating an airport. Why? Cause Mike told him to, so it had to be done, right? And I don't think I even have to mention invading a naval base or killing some shady government agents. In any case, all this for a guy that overnight turned from a gang boss to some important government guy. Thankfully, CJ is God's favorite, and despite the fact how naive he is and that he has barely any initiative, the world seems to revolve around him and always gives him what he needs at the moment. Cause notice that CJ only shows a bit of initiative at the beginning of the game, but later, apart from a few moments, everyone was thinking for him. Caesar hooked him up with Catalina. Caesar got him involved in the races. He got the garage in San Fierro from Catalina. The Truth got him the workers, and even the idea to open a mod garage was more of Kendall's idea than his. Then Woozy invited him to his business twice. Torino also was the one that called him. Like, it seems like the world literally owed CJ a living. Actually though, after all that CJ had to go through with its cap-wearing moron, the world indeed did owe him a living. Now, Toni Cipriani, who could not fight for what he deserved. Yes, even he had his limits, and he sometimes would say enough is enough, like with Vincenzo. But those who played Liberty City Stories know that the thread with Vincenzo crossed every possible limit. If Cipriani didn't do anything about that, he simply couldn't call himself a man. But with Salvatore or his mom, he was a very obedient dog. They could spit in his face all day long, and Toni would just assume it's a very rainy day. Salvatore treated him very unfairly. Toni returns to the city after a long time. He had to lay low after running a huge errand for his family. Toni killed a capo of a rival mafia for Salvatore. That was a big favor, but he had to hide afterwards. He was promised a big reward. Meanwhile, Salvatore, following Toni's return to Liberty City, goes on as if he forgot about everything. Not only Toni gets demoted, he has to do this scumbag Vincenzo's dirty work. Toni's reaction? Well, he did get a little angry initially, but after Sal gave him a lecture that it's inappropriate to disagree with your boss, good dog Toni politely agreed to become an errand boy until the end of the story. Whenever there was a suicide mission to be done, Toni was the one delegated to make it happen. A typical dirty work kind of dude. A bit like Tommy Vercetti, but in Tommy's case, we all remember what was the result of his work. In 1998, Toni did a great job for Sal, and at the end, he let Sal screw him over like a fool. Toni was meant to get a couple of millions for his work. Meanwhile, he got just $500,000.
I promise.
Damn. Ooh.
I thought you, said a couple.
I said $1 million. For what? You can put a price on friendship?
It's likely that Tony's personality was a result of his relationship with his mother, who considered him a loser and treated him like her slave. Tony must have felt very underappreciated. As a lot of y'all definitely remember, Tony's relationship with his mom is pure pathology. Tony was pulling crazy stunts for his mom, killed for no reason those who his mom pointed at the same time endangering the interests of the mafia, and his own life of course. Other than that, he photographed some perverts to prove to his mom that he's a better man than them. And even when his mom did something way above and beyond and hired hitmen to kill Tony, he still wasn't angry at her. To summarize all this, it's Tony himself who loses because of this disadvantage. Cause had he had a better ability to fight for what's his, he probably would have achieved a lot more than he eventually has. Victor Vance is a very good man, moral, fair, resourceful, and if needed, loving and caring. Unfortunately, despite that, his mental state was a very complicated matter.
Me? The world is full of suffering, then you die.
It was not a problem from the player's perspective. It was a problem, especially for Vic himself. And I tell you what, it's not really a surprise. As opposed to CJ, Vic was definitely not God's favorite. His mother was a drug fiend. She preferred to look for ways to indulge in her addiction rather than to raise her kids properly. Vic's family were immigrants, which also didn't make things easier for them. Vic's brother Lance was a crazy idiot and a blind optimist. Lance's optimism would constantly get Vic in all kinds of trouble. The other of Vic's brothers, Pete, suffered from asthma, so medical care for him consumed a big part of the family budget. So on one hand, no wonder that Vic was a pessimist. On the other hand, it doesn't change the fact that it was a huge flaw that was constantly dragging him down. It was something that was a barrier between him and the perspective of being a happy man. What also did not help was that, I don't know about you, but I've always had a feeling that Vic's lifestyle was against him. See, Vic was a person with a correctly formed moral spine. Despite that, the world and his actions brought him deeper and deeper into the criminal world, in which he had to kill, rob, and do things that he simply couldn't be proud of. Besides, even the people closest to him, so his brother and the woman of his life, would constantly get him involved in the life of crime more and more, thanks to which Vic was distancing himself away from who he truly wanted to be. On one hand, he wanted to remain in a good relationship with his brother and keep developing his relationship with Louise. On the other hand, those relationships, and especially the first of them, meant getting involved in the world, which he didn't like. Additionally, after Vic got kicked out of the army, the life of a crook was his only source of income. This also highly affected his later decisions, as it was connected with the need to keep providing financial help to his sick brother, who could only count on Vic in this crazy family. Therefore, Vic was a bit lost. Moreover, the circumstances that he found himself in were destroying him from within. He did not know how to reconcile the family, money, and his own peace of mind. The lack of this ability was a cause of multiple civil wars within him, which made it impossible for him to feel proud of who he is. Actually, very similar problems were the everyday concern of Niko Bellic as well. Niko, same as Vic, during the story of GTA 4, was conducting a lifestyle that was against his true self. On one hand, the life of a killer and a gangster was not the one he dreamt to conduct. On the other hand, Niko, using excuses such as that he wants to find Darko, his difficult past, or Roman's debts, kept going deeper into the life of crime. More than that, all those inner dilemmas, he was facing them on his own. You could see that it was not easy for him to trust people. This caused him to keep all his concerns to himself. Essentially, you could say that it was because of his lack of ability to build strong and lasting relationships, which is shown in the example of his relationship with Kate. Even there, Niko was very close. Perhaps it was all because Niko fought in a war, and that kind of environment formed his personality in such a way. Or maybe it was partially because he didn't understand his needs himself and constantly was taking actions that were against what he truly wanted, excusing his decisions with the circumstances. That's what I would go for, because it's greatly shown by one conversation with Kate, after Niko makes yet another decision against himself. So getting into a partnership with one of his biggest enemies, Dimitri, at the end of the game.
Hey, Kate. I decided to work with that guy. I don't know if it was the right decision, but I did it. He screwed me over again.
You see, Niko? You should have gone with your instinct not to trust him. I can't believe you could care about money that much.
Well, we do what we can to survive, Kate. Are you coming to Roman's wedding?
I don't think so, Niko. I don't want to be around you right now.
So to summarize that a bit, the biggest flaws of Niko were the lack of trust towards people close to him, the lack of ability to open up to others, emotional loneliness, and resorting to violence when it was not necessary. Those I consider his biggest flaws, because in my opinion, they were the main factors in league with unfavorable circumstances for why it was so hard for Niko to abandon the life that he simply didn't want for himself. What I don't like about Luis Lopez from the ballad is the way he approaches relationships with women. So the majority of his relationships with the gentle sex was about going at it at the club toilet. And as long as both people participating in something like that have similar intentions towards each other, it's cool. But if one party has got a tendency to quickly engage in a relationship, such fun can result in an emotional catastrophe. What's more, the developers wanted to give us a clear-cut example of what Luis's fun with women led to. The example is the random encounter with Margot. She was a girl that built a very strong emotional bond with Luis, although Luis never treated her seriously. And yes, of course, Margot was insane, and her behavior was sometimes terrifying. However, that don't change the fact that Margot was just another toy in Luis's hands. Considering that Margot was a psychopath, she could not stand such treatment. She'd constantly fight for Luis's attention, would write him many letters, send gifts and such. Luis obviously didn't want to continue that relationship. Over time, it ended up with Margot blackmailing Luis that if he doesn't begin to show her love, she'll kill herself. And eventually, she did indeed turn out to be a woman of her word. The obvious flaw of Johnny Klebitz that single-handedly led him to his demise as a person is the addiction to his toxic relationship with Ashley. We talked about it many times on the channel already. Ashley was a fiend, a degenerate, and essentially a completely valueless person. Johnny was at some point strong enough mentally that he decided to break up with her. That was a very rational approach. He loved Ashley, but he could see that she was destroying him, and he was able to make the right call. Although over time, Johnny gave up, which we know from GTA 5. Johnny not only returned to Ashley, but also abandoned his principles and let her get him into drugs, which resulted in a downfall of his personality, and eventually also had an indirect influence on his death. The second thing that I wanted to talk about is his passiveness towards the destructive way of running a gang by Billy. Right, of course, he'd often audibly express his disapproval towards the decisions made by his boss, but that always ended in words and never led to actions. Johnny, as a vice president of the club, should have at some point noticed that words don't work on Billy. Alternatively, he should have had a serious conversation with him about his leadership and given him an ultimatum. Johnny had backing in the club, so he had resources to, at some point, rise up to Gray and take over. And it's not about greed or anything. Johnny should have done it for the sake of the club and its members. But as we know, such actions of Johnny never occurred, which eventually led to him and James being set up and almost killed by the Chinese, which was orchestrated by Billy, who sold out his brothers with a smile on his face. We got 3 characters left to talk about, and those are the protagonists of GTA 5. We start with Franklin, whose biggest flaw was his immaturity and the other traits that were its result. Franklin constantly tried to become someone he's not.
What's happening, homie? How you been?
You know.
No, I don't know. That's why I asked.
Shit, it's all good, man. I'm just getting by.
Moving on, huh? Well, let's get one thing straight. Tanisha ain't interested in your dog ass, and she don't give a f***.
You always speaking on Tanisha like a bitch. We was together, now we not. That's that.
Oh, nigga, how mature of you.
She a cool girl, though. But it wasn't meant to be, dawg.
Oh, and now you're throwing your life away trying to get yourself all acceptable for when all the goddamn time you a jungle tiger trying to turn yourself into a bitch-ass house cat. Yeah. That bitch want a in a suit. She don't want no motherfucking killer on the prowl.
You got away with words, homie. That bitch can do what the fuck she wants. It's over.
Yeah, whatever. If you say so.
As you could hear, all that happened because of Tanisha, who broke up with Franklin due to the dangerous lifestyle that he conducted. See, Tanisha wanted to start a normal family that would stay away from the life of the streets. Franklin could not accept that rejection. He threw his life away, neglected his friendship with Lamar, and his personality in order to desperately get out of the ghetto and earn money. All that to get Tanisha back, who found herself a new man with whom she was happy. Franklin could not stand that. While sitting at a strip club, staring at the naked bodies of strippers, he was calling Tanisha, promising that he'll change and begging her to return to him. Apart from the fact that Franklin, next to his imaginary metamorphosis, neglected his friendship with Lamar, he completely did not notice that this whole change of his was only about the money. Franklin complained so much at Lamar's dangerous lifestyle, all the while living the same life, only that for more money, more professionally, and for bigger players like Michael or Weston. Then we got Michael, and here we don't have to look far. It's very similar to Franklin. However, in Michael's case, he is an even bigger and more immature egoist, which undoubtedly is his biggest flaw. As much as Franklin neglected his friendship with Lamar, plus he wouldn't admit to him that he chose Tanisha over him, Michael went a lot further than that. Michael not only sold Trevor out to the feds and faked his death, but after 9 years, when Trevor returned and found out that Michael's alive, he'd still hide the truth from him and play dumb. Even after Trevor finally connected the dots, Mike still tried to shift a few facts to make it up as if it wasn't as bad as it was. That in reality, he simply sold Trevor out to the feds in order to go and live in abundance on the West Coast. Later, he even lies to Franklin about the situation after he saves him from the Chinese, blaming Trevor that apparently he gone mad and tried to kill him for no reason. Michael was a snake. He lied and manipulated everyone for his own benefits, even those who do a lot for him. And in the end, we got Trevor, who actually knows a lot about friendship, love, loyalty, etc., etc. When it comes to that aspect, Trevor's knowledge is impressive. Interestingly enough, Trevor was the one without any friends, and everyone he ever loved eventually abandoned him. That, and probably many different factors of which I'm not aware of, led Trevor to developing a bad flaw. It's about his uncontrollable temper that sometimes turned Trevor into a total maniac. The reputation of a psycho resulted in people not wanting to have any dealings with Trevor. The people that did deal with him were doing so because they were terrified of that sicko. And that's the worst part, because notice that Trevor developed a defensive strategy to do with this. Okay, whenever I'm good and friendly to someone, I'm being rejected. But whenever I'm bad and violent, then people stick to me. See Wade and Ron. Let me know what you'd change, with which flaws you agree, and with which you don't. Meanwhile, thank you for watching, and I recommend watching the videos displayed on the right side of the screen. Take care and see you soon.